to the general speakers list, and I'm very strict with time. I cannot give you a second over. So Madam Hübner will set the example for 1.5 minutes. Thank you.
Madam President, don't start with me, but thank you. I still have to make one comment, because what I was also shocked in Mr. Batten's statement was that he called UK as nominally a democracy. I would disagree. I think it's in reality a democracy. Let me start, however, on a positive note, welcoming rather encouraging reports on launching of the settled status scheme in the UK. But the challenge today, I think, is somewhere else. And for 129 days, we have a withdrawal deal on the table, and we have European Council decision now regarding extension until 12th of April. So it is dramatically late, but not too late, and there is still a chance to avoid no deal by accident. But that requires from UK to set a workable plan with a clear end result. And it is the last chance for Prime Minister May to establish with Labour Party leader a common approach based on what was lacking so far, which is trust. A common approach that would allow UK to move forward and avoid no deal, and this is crucial because the future of citizens is at stake. All House of Commons concerns that we see relate to political declaration, and we are ready to look at different options to accommodate British worries about the future. Let me finish by underlining once more that no deal is in nobody's interest, and no deal is not what the European Union has striven for, and no deal is not what the United Kingdom has committed to achieve. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Corbett, 1 minute.
Does Mrs May really wish to make a deal with Jeremy Corbyn? It would involve her abandoning everything she has said up to now about customs union, single market, abandoning every red line she laid down. If she doesn't, the House of Commons will continue to reject her deal and to want to avoid a no-deal scenario. But it's significant that in the indicative votes that took place in the House of Commons, the one that gained the highest number of votes was the proposal to have a confirmatory referendum, putting it back to the people. And that's not surprising, because look at public opinion in Britain. Look at the swings in the opinion polls. Look at the numbers of people who've signed a petition to simply revoke Article 50. There is growing support for reversing this historic mistake. And on the 10th of April, it would be folly if the European Council decided that it prefers to end this without a deal and without further ado, just at the point when we can change this course of action. Thank you.
Mr. Henkel, for 1.5 minutes.
We have heard earlier Mr. Farage, Mr. Batten, Mr. O'Flynn and Mr. Hooken, and I think they are experts in London bashing as much as Mr. Verhofstadt is. Mr. President Juncker, last week you accused Britain's ex-Prime Minister to be one of the biggest destroyers in recent history. While I agree that Brexit is indeed a catastrophe for both Britain and the European Union, I ask myself, how can you put Mr. Cameron in the same gallery as other real destroyers of history in Europe? I think I know the reason. I think you want to deflect from your own role in Brexit. Where the Lisbon Treaty called for competition, you advocated the opposite, harmonization. Where the treaty called for subsidiarity, your Commission constantly pushed for more power to Brussels. And while Britain joined a football club, you decided to play hockey. It was your policies which forced David Cameron to call for a referendum in the first place. And it was your refusal, to grant him more autonomy on immigration matters, which contributed
Please allow the Speaker
to the narrow outcome.
Please, Mr. Henkel.
Yeah, the
Look, can I just
hurts
no,
in
please,
this House, I realize.
let me just say, I've heard rubbish from this side of the House. I don't want to hear it from that side of the House. Please let the Speaker have the floor without interruption.
Mr. Cameron is not one of the biggest destroyers in recent history, but your insult of David Cameron must be one of the biggest smokescreens ever produced by a politician in recent history. Avoid that you become the president who lost Britain. give Mrs. May an extension without any conditions, so we maintain a chance so they stay in the European Union.
Madam Bearder, for 1 minute, please.
In 1949, Europe was in chaos, a mess left by a war of hate and racism. Thankfully, visionary, clear-thinking people worked to build a safe, secure, united and free Europe, building a union based on values and principles that protect its citizens with freedoms that were just a dream in 1949. We all stand on the shoulders of those architects, Schuman, Monet, Adenauer, Churchill and our own Simone Weil, and so many others. This union is a gem. It sets the benchmark for the world on trade, standards, environmental protection and human rights. It's not perfect, but it's the best yet. We must all defend it. And this chamber is the shining example of cooperation and tolerance. Oh, I wish Westminster could follow our example. As the UK turns its back on the EU, descending into chaos and confusion, whatever the outcome, it will be bad for Britain. So I look to future generations, including my own sons, born as European citizens with hard-won rights into a peaceful continent. It is the young who must rebuild the UK's trust with the EU, bringing Britain back to its rightful place with its closest neighbours. Sorry, Madam Chairman, just one. On a personal note, I thank you for the tolerance you have all shown to us Brits as we have driven you to the end of your patience. Thanks
Madam,
too
you really
for the
will have to
friendship
stop speaking.
and
Thank
support
you.
to me and others with so many in this House as we've been fighting to stay
Madam
with
Bearder,
you.
I really
you
will
will
have to
remain our
interrupt.
friends. Thank you.
And not only that, colleagues, I broke the gavel. So I have a real problem keeping time. But on a very serious note, we have a real difficulty. I'm going to announce now that there is no catch the eye possible at all, with my apologies to colleagues who wanted to make an intervention. And I ask the next speakers to please adhere to time. Madam Anderson for 1 minute. Thank you.
What the British government could not do to Ireland during the conflict, Member States, 27 of you, must not even contemplate doing during peace. Our peace process is too important, so don't even try to contemplate to reinforce partition by hardening the border in Ireland. And as for erecting two borders, the solution is to remove borders, not to add borders. Of course, the EU needs to protect its single market. However, the EU must also uphold its treaty obligation to do no damage to an international agreement, the Good Friday Agreement. There is a democratically endorsed way for the EU to do both, yet you are ignoring the solution. If you think by constructing two borders in Ireland, you will encourage the British back to the negotiation table after a crash, you know little about the British establishment, because it doesn't give a hoot about the people of Ireland. It never has and it never will. So if in the event of the crash you choose not to advance our democratic pathway back into the EU, then at least do no bloody harm.
More strong language. Our next speaker for 1 minute, Mr. HUDGHTON.
Thank you, Madam Vice President. A little over 20 years ago in this hemicycle, I made my first speech, plenary speech, as an SNP member, Scotland's Party of Independence, and I came here hoping that I would play a part in Scotland's transition to normality as an independent country. That was not to be, and look where we are now. I could never have imagined 20 years ago that it would be trapped in this idiotic Westminster chaos of Brexit. Voters in Scotland voted to remain. Every single local authority area in Scotland voted by majority to remain, and yet Westminster continues to ignore Scotland's interests in this process. And to date, we have seen the London Government and Parliament failing even to make a negotiated settlement amongst themselves, let alone an international one. Scotland can and must do better. And I think that our recent experience in the last 2 or 3 years has amply illustrated the argument for independence for Scotland, so that we as a normal country, can make our own arrangements with our neighbours and the rest of the world.
Mr. Downs, please, for 1 minute.
Thank you very much. Ms Foster, that was quite some speech. You say goodbye to Remainers. Well, given Brexit has destroyed the Conservative Party, fairly soon we'll be able to say goodbye and good riddance to the Conservative Party, and I look forward to that day. Colleagues, we cannot rely on a decision that's made in a panic. If the deal is passed in a panic, if some other concoction is passed in a panic, it is not sustainable. I understand we want a resolution to this. I want that no less than anyone else. But please, we may need more time. The only sustainable way forward is to put whatever comes out of this process to a vote of the people, because it is nothing like what was offered in 2016. And don't be afraid of giving us more time if we need a longer extension. Mr. Verhofstadt and others, don't judge us by the people over there who rail against the benefits of the European Union. Judge my country by the plurality of people that are in it, the pro-Europeans, the millions who have signed the petition to revoke Article 50, the millions who have taken to the streets to defend the values of this place. We are the true Britain. We defend Europe, we defend its values, and we're not going anywhere. Don't be afraid of us. Welcome us and give us the time we need.
Madam Girling, for 1 minute, please.
Thank you. And thank you to Mr. Dance, because I can follow very neatly on from what he said, and I can drop some of what I was going to say. But I want to appeal to members of this Parliament directly as fellow parliamentarians. We represent the people of Europe, the citizens of Europe. And as we stand at this moment, 60-odd million of them still reside in the UK. We are still members of the European Union. We have not left yet. We have not got an agreement to leave yet. Please, I ask you to remember that, because for us, it's really important that you give us the opportunity to redress the damage that has been done. And the only way that can happen is by giving us a long extension and us fighting the European elections. Yes, Mrs. May is terrified of fighting the European elections, and so is every other Westminster politician that you will see on the TV, and so are my friends over here, because they know that unlike their rhetoric of dangling the bogeyman of Mr. Farage coming back, actually it's going to be quite tricky for them. And you're going to return, if we have the European election, a very strong pro-European contingent from the UK. Give us that opportunity. Don't jump off the cliff.